Jiho wiped the sweat from his forehead as he tightened the last bolt on the alien power unit. The metal was strange under his fingers, smooth and warm like living skin. 3 years ago, he would never have imagined touching Velthari technology. 3 years ago, Earth was still free. The compound buzzed with activity around him. Tall, gray-skinned Velthari soldiers walked past, their dark eyes never looking at the human workers. To them, humans were tools, useful, but nothing more. Jiho had learned to keep his head down and his mouth shut. Speaking without permission meant punishment. Sometimes it meant disappearing. He picked up his toolbox and moved to the next machine. The compound stretched across what used to be downtown Seoul. The Velthari had landed here first, turning the city center into their military headquarters. The war had lasted only 3 weeks. Their ships had filled the sky, blocking out the sun. Their weapons had torn through every defense Earth could offer. Humanity surrendered before the month ended. Now Jiho fixed their machines. It was better than the labor camps, better than the factories where humans assembled alien weapons they would never be allowed to use. At least here, he could think. He could observe. He could learn. Human worker. The voice came from above. Jiho looked up to see a Velthari engineer pointing at a wall panel. This section. Clean it. Jiho nodded and moved quickly. The engineer watched him for a moment, then walked away. They always watched, always suspicious that humans might sabotage something, even though everyone knew the punishment for sabotage was death. As Jiho cleaned the panel, he noticed something. The energy readings on the display flickered. Just a small variation, but it was there. He had seen this before. The conduit behind this wall was old, probably stressed. In a few days, maybe a week, it would fail. But he said nothing. They never asked for his opinion. They never wanted to hear what a human thought. The afternoon sun was setting when Commander Velkas entered the compound's main power facility. Jiho recognized him immediately. Everyone did. Velkas was tall, even for a Velthari, with silver markings on his uniform that showed his rank. He commanded the entire Seoul occupation zone. Humans scattered from his path like leaves before wind. Velkas stopped at a central console and spoke with his chief engineer. Jiho could not hear the words, but he could see the engineer's body language. Something was wrong. The engineer gestured at screens, his movements sharp and frustrated. Velkas stood perfectly still, watching. That was the Velthari way, cold, controlled, never showing emotion. The next morning, alarms woke the entire compound before dawn. Jiho rushed to the power facility with the other workers and found chaos. The main power conduit had failed. The entire section Jiho had noticed the day before was dark, sparking with residual energy. Velthari engineers surrounded it, their portable computers glowing as they ran calculations. Jiho watched from the corner where human workers were told to wait. He could see the problem clearly. The conduit had overloaded exactly where he expected. The Velthari were trying to fix it using their standard protocols, running power through the primary channels in carefully calculated bursts. But those channels were damaged too. He could see the scorch marks from where he stood. Hours passed. The Velthari engineers worked without stopping, but nothing changed. They recalculated. They adjusted their approach. They followed every procedure in their technical manuals. The power stayed dead. Jiho shifted his weight from foot to foot. His legs ached from standing so long. Other human workers whispered nervously. If the power was not restored soon, someone would be blamed. It would not be the Velthari engineers. It never was. By afternoon, Commander Velkas returned. He spoke briefly with his chief engineer. The engineer's head lowered in what looked like shame. Velkas stood motionless for a long moment, then turned and scanned the human workers. His eyes found Jiho. "You!" Velkas said, pointing directly at him. "Come here." Jiho's heart hammered in his chest. Every human in the room watched as he walked forward. Had he done something wrong? Was this punishment for yesterday? For not reporting the failing conduit? Velkas looked down at him. The commander's face was unreadable, but something in his dark eyes seemed different, less certain than before. "You repair our machines every day," Velkas said. His voice was deep and strange, the words heavily accented. "You watch my engineers work. Can you fix this?" The question stunned Jiho into silence. A Velthari commander was asking a human for help? It was impossible. It violated every rule of the occupation. "Commander," the chief engineer said quickly, "this human has no training in our systems. He cannot—" "I asked him—" "Not you," Velkas interrupted. He kept his eyes on Jiho. "Can you fix this?" Jiho swallowed hard. He could lie, say no, and return to safety. Or he could tell the truth and risk everything. "Maybe," Jiho said quietly, "but not using your methods." The room fell completely silent. A human had just told the Velthari their methods were wrong. Several engineers turned to stare. The chief engineer's face darkened with anger. But Velkas only nodded once, a small movement. "Then use yours," he said. "You have until tomorrow morning. High Command arrives then. If the power is not restored, we all face consequences." He paused. "Fix it however you want. Ignore our protocols. That is my order." Then he turned and walked away, leaving Jiho standing alone before the broken machine. Surrounded by shocked Velthari engineers and terrified human workers, everything had just changed. For several seconds after Commander Velkas left, nobody moved. The Velthari engineers stared at Jiho like he was a bomb about to explode. The human workers looked terrified for him. Everyone knew what happened to humans who failed the Velthari. Jiho took a deep breath and stepped toward the broken conduit. His hands shook slightly, but he forced them steady. He had one chance, one night. If he failed, people would die. Maybe just him, maybe everyone in this room. "I need help," he said, turning to face the other human workers. "Sora, Do-yun, I need you." A young woman with short black hair stepped forward. Sora had been a chemical engineer before the invasion. Now she cleaned Velthari laboratories. Beside her, a thin man with glasses moved carefully through the crowd. Do-hyun had worked with electronics and computers his whole life. The Velthari had him sorting inventory. "Are you insane?" Do-hyun whispered when he reached Jiho. "They will kill us if we touch their equipment wrong." "They will kill us if we do nothing," Jiho replied. He looked at both of them. "I cannot do this alone. Please." Sora nodded slowly. "Tell us what you need." The Velthari chief engineer blocked their path to the conduit. "You cannot simply—" "The commander gave an order," Jiho said, surprised by the strength in his own voice. "We follow it, or we all fail together." The engineer's face twisted with anger, but he stepped aside. Velkas had given the order. Even he could not override his commander. Jiho knelt beside the damaged conduit and opened his toolbox. The Velthari had been trying to restore power through the main channels using precise energy calculations. That was their way. Everything perfect, everything controlled. But the main channels were burned out. Pushing more power through them would only cause more damage. "Look here," Jiho said to Sora and Do-hyun, pointing at a schematic on his portable screen. "See these secondary lines? The Velthari think they are backup systems only. Inefficient. They waste 3% of energy compared to the main channels." "So they ignore them," Do-hyun said, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Exactly. But if we reroute power through all the secondary lines at once, we can bypass the damage completely." Jiho traced his finger across the screen. "It wastes energy, yes. But it works." "The Velthari computers will not allow it," Sora pointed out. "Their systems are programmed to use optimal paths only." "Then we work around the computers," Jiho said. For the next 2 hours, they worked in silence. Jiho manually opened connection points the Velthari system had sealed as non-optimal. Do-Yun bypassed safety protocols, his fingers flying across control panels as he rewired pathways the alien computers tried to block. Sora mixed cooling compounds from basic Earth chemicals, creating solutions to prevent the secondary lines from overheating under the increased load. The Velthari engineers watched everything. Some took notes. Others muttered to each other in their own language. One young engineer approached and asked questions about what Jiho was doing. Jiho explained as best he could, though the engineer seemed unable to understand why wasting energy could ever be a solution. Midnight came and went. Jiho's back ached from bending over the conduit. His eyes burned from staring at tiny connection points. Beside him, Sora carefully poured her homemade cooling solution into reservoir tanks. Do-Hyun sat cross-legged on the floor, 3 different control panels open around him, creating a web of manual overrides. "This is madness," the chief engineer said at one point. "Your methods are crude, wasteful. Even if it works, it violates every principle of proper engineering." "Maybe," Jiho said without looking up. "But your principles did not fix the problem." At 3 in the morning, Sora sealed the last cooling tank. Do-Hyun entered the final override command. Jiho connected the last secondary power line and sat back on his heels. "Ready?" he asked. Sora and Do-Hyun nodded. Jiho reached for the activation switch, then hesitated. If this failed, the entire conduit could explode. The blast would kill everyone in the room. His hand hovered over the switch. "Do it," Sora said quietly. "We trust you." Jiho pressed the switch. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a low hum filled the room. Lights flickered once, twice, then blazed to life. Screens activated. Machines that had been dark for 18 hours began to glow. Power flowed through the compound like water through a dam. It worked. The human workers erupted in shocked whispers. Several Velthari engineers immediately rushed to their instruments, checking readings and running diagnostics. The chief engineer stood frozen, staring at the functioning conduit as if he could not believe what he saw. Jiho stood slowly, his legs barely supporting him. Sora grabbed his arm to steady him. Do-Yun laughed, a sound halfway between relief and hysteria. "The power flow is stable," one Velthari engineer reported, reading from his screen. "All secondary lines are functioning within acceptable parameters. Temperature is elevated but manageable." "Elevated by 3.2%, another engineer added. "Energy efficiency is reduced by 2.8% compared to optimal function." "But it works," the first engineer said quietly, almost to himself. "It should not work, but it does." The doors opened and Commander Velkus entered. He must have been waiting nearby, watching somehow. He walked to the central console and examined the readings. His face showed nothing, but Jiho saw his eyes move across the data with intense focus. Finally, Velkus turned to face Jiho. "Explain what you did." Jiho swallowed and explained the secondary line approach. As he talked, he watched Velkus's expression. The commander listened without interrupting, processing every word. "You used inferior pathways," Velkus said when Jiho finished. "You accepted reduced efficiency. You worked against our computers instead of with them." "Yes, Commander." "And it functions better than our optimal solution." It was not a question. Velkus looked at his chief engineer. "How long did your team work on this?" 12 hours, Commander," the engineer replied, his voice tight. "And these humans fixed it in 4. Velkus was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something Jiho never expected. The commander bowed his head slightly, a gesture of respect. "Well done." Jiho did not know what to say. A Velthari commander had just shown respect to a human. Several engineers looked shocked. The chief engineer appeared physically ill. "Return to your quarters," Velkus ordered. "All of you, get rest. As Jiho and the others turned to leave, the commander added, "Human worker Jiho, I will speak with you again soon." As Jiho walked back through the dark compound with Sora and Do-yun, none of them spoke. They were too tired and too stunned by what had happened. But Jiho could not stop thinking about Velkas's final words and the way the commander had looked at the functioning power conduit. Something had shifted, something important. Jiho did not know what would come next, but he knew one thing with certainty. The Velthari had just learned that their way was not the only way. And that knowledge, Jiho suspected, was far more dangerous than any weapon. 2 weeks passed before Jiho saw Commander Velkas again. During that time, strange things began happening in the compound. Human workers were being reassigned. Instead of cleaning or carrying supplies, some were now working directly alongside Velthari engineers. It violated every occupation regulation. The other human workers whispered nervously about it, wondering what it meant. Jiho continued repairing machines, but now Velthari engineers sometimes asked him questions. They wanted to understand how he had solved the conduit problem. He tried to explain, but they struggled to accept answers that did not follow mathematical perfection. To them, there was always one correct solution. The idea of multiple working solutions, each with different advantages, seemed to confuse them. One morning, guards came to Jiho's workstation. "Commander Velkas requests your presence," one said. They led him to a conference room he had never seen before. Inside, Velkas stood before a large display showing technical diagrams. 2 other Velthari officers flanked him. They all turned when Jiho entered. "Human worker Jiho," Velkas said, "I have been studying your repair method. My engineers still cannot fully explain why it succeeded. They say your approach was logically flawed, yet the evidence proves otherwise." He paused. "This troubles me. It suggests our understanding is incomplete." Jiho said nothing. He had learned that silence was often safer than speech. "I want to conduct an experiment," Velkas continued. "I am assigning selected humans to work with my staff on various projects. This is unauthorized by High Command. If it fails, I will face consequences. But if it succeeds—" He left the sentence unfinished. "You will help me select which humans to use." And so it began. Jiho became an unofficial coordinator, identifying human workers with useful skills. He found Hyejin, who had been a medical researcher. She was assigned to the Velthari medical facility. He recruited Taiyang, a programmer for the technology division. Each assignment was kept quiet. Each was an experiment. Hyejin was the first to achieve results. She had been working in the medical bay for 3 weeks when she noticed something odd. Velthari doctors treated every illness with advanced nanobots that attacked symptoms directly. A human with an infection received nanobots that killed the bacteria. It worked perfectly, but the same human would often return with another infection a month later. "You only treat the sickness," Hyejin told the Velthari head doctor one day. "You never ask why the person got sick." The doctor looked at her with confusion. "The bacteria caused the infection. We eliminated the bacteria. The treatment is complete." "But why did the bacteria succeed?" Hyejin pressed. "Maybe the person is not eating properly. Maybe they work in a contaminated area. Maybe stress has weakened their immune system. If you never fix these problems, they will keep getting sick." The Velthari doctor stared at her. "We are not concerned with eating habits. We treat disease, not lifestyle." "Then you will keep treating the same people forever," Hyejin said. She started a program without official permission. When humans came to the medical bay, she asked questions about their lives. What they ate, where they worked, how they slept. She created charts and tracked patterns. Then she made changes. She convinced the compound kitchen to add certain vegetables to human meals. She identified a storage area with mold growing in the ventilation and had it cleaned. She started teaching humans simple exercises to reduce stress. 6 weeks later, the Velthari head doctor called Hyejin to his office. She expected punishment. Instead, he showed her data on his screen. Infection rates among human workers have decreased by 40%, he said. No change in nanobot treatment protocols, no new medications. He looked at her. This should not be possible. Explain. Hyejin explained prevention. She explained how health was more than just fixing broken parts. The doctor listened, his expression slowly changing from confusion to something that might have been wonder. We never considered this approach, he admitted. In our medicine, we identify problems and eliminate them with precision. The idea of preventing problems before they occur, he trailed off. It is inefficient in the short term, but over time, he looked at his data again. May I study your methods? In the technology division, Tae-yang was making similar discoveries. The Velthari had asked him to help debug their artificial intelligence systems. Their AI was incredibly advanced, capable of controlling entire starships. But it had a weakness. When faced with unexpected situations, it sometimes froze, unable to decide on a course of action. Your AI is too perfect, Tae-yang explained to the lead programmer. It looks for the optimal solution. But in a crisis, there might not be time to find the perfect answer. Sometimes a good enough answer right now is better than a perfect answer too late. The Velthari programmer disagreed. Optimal solutions are always superior. Accepting lesser solutions is illogical. Tae-yang thought for a moment. Let me show you something. He created a test simulation of a starship encountering an unexpected asteroid field. He ran it through the Velthari AI. The AI began calculating the optimal path through the asteroids, running millions of trajectory simulations. But before it finished calculating, the simulated ship hit an asteroid. The perfect path was never completed. Then Tae-yang added something to the AI code. He introduced randomization. He taught the AI to make quick, imperfect decisions when time was limited, and only seek optimal solutions when time allowed. He made the AI comfortable with uncertainty. He ran the simulation again. This time, the AI immediately began dodging asteroids, making split-second decisions. The path was not perfect. The ship took unnecessary turns, but it survived. The Velthari programmer watched in silence. Then he ran the simulation 10 more times. The AI survived every time, using a different imperfect path each time. The programmer seemed unable to find words. This contradicts our fundamental approach to artificial intelligence. Maybe, Tae-yang said, but it works. Word of these successes spread quietly among Velthari officers. Some were curious. They began asking their human workers for opinions on problems. Others were angry, viewing this as a challenge to Velthari superiority. Arguments broke out in officer meetings. The compound became divided. Commander Velkas observed it all. He kept detailed records of every human contribution, every success, every failure. At night, after his staff left, he studied these records alone. Jiho sometimes saw lights in the commander's office long after midnight. One evening, Velkas called Jiho to his office. The commander looked tired, something Jiho had never seen in a Velthari before. I have made a mistake, Velkas said without greeting. When we conquered your world, we assumed superiority in all things. We believed our technology made us better, smarter, more evolved. He gestured at the data covering his screens. But technology is not intelligence. It is not wisdom. We built perfect tools and forgot how to think imperfectly. Why are you telling me this? Jiho asked. Because in 3 days I must report to High Command, Velkas said. They will ask why I allowed humans to work alongside our engineers. They will call it a breach of protocol, perhaps even treason. He looked directly at Jiho. But I will show them what we have learned, and I will recommend that this experiment expand across all of Earth. Jiho felt his chest tighten. They will never agree to that. Perhaps not, Velkas agreed. But the evidence speaks for itself. Your people have improved our efficiency in every area where we allowed cooperation. He paused. I begin to think we did not conquer Earth. We occupied it. There is a difference. Before Jiho could respond, alarms blared throughout the compound. Red emergency lights flooded the office. Velkas immediately accessed his command console. What is it? Jiho asked. Velkas's face went rigid as he read the incoming message. When he looked up, something like fear showed in his eyes. The Krell swarm has entered Velthari space, he said quietly. They have destroyed 3 of our border fleets. High Command is calling all forces to respond. He stood abruptly. This meeting is over. Return to your quarters and await instructions. As Jiho hurried through the compound, he saw Velthari soldiers running to battle stations. Ships were launching from the compound's landing pads. Officers shouted orders in their harsh language. The occupation of Earth suddenly seemed very small compared to whatever was happening in the stars above. He did not know it yet, but everything was about to change again. The Krell swarm came like a plague of locusts across the stars. News filtered down to Earth in fragments over the following weeks. 5 Velthari fleets destroyed, 12 colony worlds burning. The Velthari Empire, which had seemed invincible when it conquered Earth, was being torn apart. Jiho watched the compound transform. Half the Velthari forces on Earth were recalled to the front lines. The remaining soldiers walked with tension in every movement. Even Commander Velkas looked strained, his silver uniform no longer perfectly maintained. The Velthari would not speak about what was happening, but Taeyang hacked into their communication network and shared the truth with the other humans. The Krell were not like any enemy the Velthari had faced before. They did not use calculated tactics or logical strategies. They attacked in chaotic swarms, their ships moving in patterns that seemed random. Velthari battle computers could not predict their movements. Velthari commanders could not outthink an enemy that did not think logically. They are losing, Taeyang told Jiho one night in the human barracks. The Velthari are brilliant at war when war follows rules, but the Krell do not follow any rules at all. On the 43rd day after the Krell invasion began, Commander Velkas summoned Jiho to his office. When Jiho arrived, he found not just Velkas, but also Sora, Dohyun, Hyejin, and Taeyang. 6 Velthari officers stood around the room, watching the humans with expressions that mixed desperation and distrust. The Empire is dying, Velkas said bluntly. High Command projects complete defeat within 6 months. We cannot adapt quickly enough to counter the Krell tactics. He paused. I have been ordered to strip Earth of all defensive systems and send them to the front. Your planet will be left undefended. You are telling us this why? Sora asked. Because I am going to disobey that order, Velkas said. Several of his officers shifted uncomfortably. I am going to do something that my superiors will consider treason. I am going to ask for your help. Silence filled the room. Jiho looked at the other humans. They all wore the same expression of shock. You conquered us, Hyejin said slowly. You killed millions of our people. You made us slaves. And now you want our help? Yes, Velkas said simply. And in exchange, I offer Earth its freedom, full autonomy. If we survive this war, humanity will be released from occupation. We should let you die, Dohyun said, anger sharp in his voice. Why would we save you? Because if we fall, the Krell will come here next, Velkas replied. They do not conquer. They consume. Every world they take is stripped of all life. Every species they encounter is exterminated. If the Velthari Empire falls, Earth has perhaps 1 year before the Krell arrive. The room was quiet except for the hum of machinery. Jiho thought about what Velkas was offering. Freedom. But only if they could survive what was coming. What do you want us to do? Jiho asked. Fight with us, Velkas said. Not as soldiers, as strategists. You think differently than we do. You see solutions we cannot. That is what we need against an enemy like the Krell. We would need access to your military command, Taeyang said. Your weapons systems, your fleet communications, everything. You will have it, Velkas promised. And you would need to contact the human resistance, Sora added. The real military leaders, the generals who fought you during the invasion, not just us. Velkas nodded slowly. I know your resistance exists. I have always known. I chose not to eliminate it because I believed someday it might be useful. He looked at each of them. Bring me your military leaders. Convince them to help. We have little time. It took 3 days to arrange the meeting. The human resistance leadership had been hiding in the mountains outside Seoul. They came to the compound under cover of darkness, weapons hidden beneath their clothes, ready to die if this was a trap. Mina arrived first. She had been a general in the South Korean military before the invasion. Now she commanded 3,000 resistance fighters scattered across the country. Her face was hard, her eyes cold as she faced Velkas across the conference table. I should kill you where you stand, she said quietly. You would die moments later, Velkas replied, and it would accomplish nothing. Yunho came next. He had been a tactical analyst, one of the best Earth had. The Velthari had been hunting him for 3 years. He studied Velkas with the careful attention of someone analyzing an opponent. This is either a brilliant trap or you are truly desperate, Yunho said as he sat down. I am betting on desperate. 4 more resistance leaders arrived. Each carried the weight of years of fighting, hiding, watching their people suffer. They listened as Velkas explained the situation. They examined the data on the Krell invasion. They saw the projections showing the Velthari Empire's collapse. Why should we believe you will honor this deal? Mina demanded. What stops you from betraying us once the Krell are defeated? Nothing, Velkas admitted. You must trust that I understand what humans have taught me, that there are some problems perfect technology cannot solve. That adaptability is worth more than precision. He stood. And you must trust that I would rather share a galaxy with humans than be exterminated by the Krell. The resistance leaders argued among themselves for hours. Jiho watched Mina pace the room, her hand never far from her concealed weapon. Yunho sat perfectly still, his mind clearly running through countless scenarios. Finally, they reached a decision. We will help, Mina said, but not just us. You will need to arm human soldiers, train them, give them ships. We fight as allies, not as servants. Agreed, Velkas said immediately. We begin tomorrow. The next morning, human and Velthari personnel gathered in the compound's war room for the first time. The atmosphere was tense. Velthari officers stood on one side, resistance fighters on the other. 3 years of hatred filled the space between them. Velkas pulled up a tactical display showing the current Krell advance. They have pushed our forces back to the Gorath sector. We must stop them there or lose access to our primary supply lines. Our fleet will engage them in 72 hours. He looked at Yunho. How would you fight this battle? Yunho studied the display for a long moment. I would not engage them directly. The Krell want you to meet them in open battle. That is where their chaos tactics work best. He zoomed in on the sector map. Instead, I would draw them into this asteroid field. Then I would hit them from multiple angles with small, fast attack groups. Force them to split their swarm. Make them react to you instead of you reacting to them. A Velthari admiral shook his head. That is inefficient. Our large battle groups have superior firepower. Splitting our forces weakens us. Your large battle groups are getting destroyed, Mina said bluntly. Maybe it is time to try something different. The argument continued for hours. Velthari doctrine against human experience. Perfect mathematical calculations against gut instinct and adaptation. Finally, Velkas made a decision. "We will try the human approach," he announced. "Admiral Koreth, prepare assault groups according to Yunho's specifications. We have 70 hours to train our crews in these new tactics." As the Velthari officers hurried to their tasks, Jiho saw doubt on many of their faces. They were being asked to abandon everything they had been trained to believe. To trust the judgment of their former enemies, it was asking the impossible. But they did it anyway, because the alternative was extinction. 2 days later, Jiho stood in the command center alongside Sora, Do-hyun, and the others. Massive displays showed the Velthari fleet moving into position near the asteroid field, hundreds of ships now divided into small attack groups. Human advisors stood beside Velthari commanders throughout the fleet, connected by communication links. On the opposite side of the display, a red mass appeared, the Krell Swarm, thousands of ships moving in their characteristic chaos pattern, like a living organism spreading through space. "All units, engage," Velkas ordered. The first human Velthari battle began, and with it, the real test of whether two species could truly work together. The first minutes of battle were chaos. The Krell Swarm rushed forward in their unpredictable patterns, thousands of ships moving like angry hornets. Velthari commanders, accustomed to organized formations, struggled to follow the human tactical plan. Several attack groups hesitated, their training screaming at them to form defensive lines. "Stay with the plan," Yunho said calmly into the communication channel. He stood beside Velkas in the command center, watching the displays. "Let them come to you. Wait." The Krell hit the first Velthari attack group with overwhelming force. For a moment, it looked like the group would be destroyed. Then Mina's voice came through the communication link. "Group 7, flank them from below. Group 12, hit their upper formations. Make them split their attention." The Velthari groups moved as instructed. The Krell Swarm, faced with multiple threats from different angles, divided to respond. Their overwhelming force became several smaller forces. "Now," Yunho said, "all groups, press the attack." What followed was unlike any battle the Velthari had ever fought. Instead of meeting the enemy head-on with superior firepower, the Velthari ships darted through the asteroid field like fish through coral. Human advisors called out tactics that made no mathematical sense but worked in practice. When a Velthari group was outnumbered, they retreated into the asteroids instead of standing their ground. When the Krell pursued, other groups attacked from behind. It was messy. It was imperfect. It was working. Jiho watched from his station, his job to coordinate communication between the human advisors and Velthari commanders. He saw resistance on both sides. Velthari officers who questioned orders, human fighters who could not fully trust their former conquerors. But they pushed through it because they had no choice. Hours into the battle, the Krell began adapting. Their chaos patterns shifted, becoming even more unpredictable. A massive section of the swarm broke off and attacked Group 4 from an unexpected direction. "Group 4 is in trouble," Velkas said, tension in his voice. "They are surrounded." Taiyang was monitoring the overall fleet patterns from his station. "Send Groups 9 and 15. But do not go directly to help. Circle around through Sector G7. Make the Krell think you are retreating, then hit them from the side." "That will take 8 minutes, a Velthari admiral protested. "Group 4 will not survive 8 minutes. "Then tell Group 4 to run," Hyejin said from her medical station. She had been tracking casualties and noticed a pattern. "Stop fighting and just dodge. Make the Krell chase them deeper into the asteroid field." The admiral looked at Velkas. The commander nodded. "Do it." Group 4 broke formation and fled. The Krell pursued eagerly, sensing victory. But the asteroid slowed the Krell ships while the Velthari commanders, now familiar with the field from hours of fighting, navigated more efficiently. When Groups 9 and 15 arrived from the flank, they caught the Krell completely off guard. The swarm section was destroyed in minutes. "I will never understand how you knew that would work," the Admiral said quietly to Hyejin. "Sometimes survival is better than victory," she replied. "You can always win later if you survive now." The battle lasted 14 hours. By the end, both sides were exhausted. The Krell had lost nearly 40% of their forces and retreated in disarray. The Velthari had lost 18%, far less than in any previous engagement with the Krell. When the command center confirmed the Krell were gone, silence filled the room. Then a Velthari communications officer stood and began a slow, rhythmic clapping. Others joined. Within moments, the entire command center erupted in applause, Velthari and humans together. Velkas turned to Yunho and Mina. "You saved us today." "We saved each other," Mina corrected. "Your ships, our tactics. Neither would have won alone." That first battle was only the beginning. Over the next 3 months, the war against the Krell consumed everything. More humans were brought into Velthari command structures. Jiho led a team designing hybrid ships that combined Velthari energy weapons with human-style unpredictable maneuvering systems. Sora developed chemical weapons specifically designed to exploit Krell biology, something Velthari science had considered too imprecise. Dohyun reprogrammed entire fleets of Velthari AI to think more like humans, accepting uncertainty and chaos. The resistance fighters were given ships and weapons. They trained alongside Velthari soldiers. At first, old hatreds made cooperation nearly impossible. Fights broke out. Some humans refused to work with the Velthari. Some Velthari refused to take orders from humans. But as the Krell pushed deeper into both Velthari and human space, those divisions became luxuries no one could afford. A Velthari pilot whose ship was damaged learned to trust the human engineer who fixed it with inefficient methods. A human soldier surrounded by Krell learned to rely on Velthari plasma fire to save their life. Survival bonded them in ways politics never could. The turning point came at the Battle of Three Suns. The Krell had massed their largest fleet yet, intending to break through to the Velthari homeworld. Every ship the Alliance could spare was sent to stop them. Jiho was there, aboard a command ship, coordinating between 50 different battle groups. The battle should have been a disaster. The Krell outnumbered them 2-1, but the human Velthari Alliance had learned to fight as one force, Velthari precision combined with human adaptability. Velthari technology powered by human creativity. When Velthari commanders could not understand the Krell's chaos, human advisors suggested tactics that embraced chaos in return. When human ships needed more firepower, Velthari weapons platforms provided it. The battle lasted 3 days. When it ended, the Krell swarm was broken. Their fleets scattered and retreated beyond the border. They would send raiding parties for years to come, but the massive invasion was over. In the aftermath, Jiho stood on the observation deck of the command ship, looking out at the stars. Thousands of ships floated in formation, Velthari and human vessels side by side. Some were damaged, many would never return home, but they had won. Velkas found him there. The commander looked older than he had 6 months ago. The war had aged them all. "The High Council has made their decision," Velkas said. "Earth is granted full autonomy, effective immediately. All occupation forces will withdraw within the year." He paused. "They are also offering humanity partnership in the Empire, not as subjects but as equals. Full voting rights, shared technology, joint military command." "And if we refuse?" Jiho asked. "Then we leave in peace, and hope you will remember what we accomplished together if trouble comes again." Velkas looked out at the fleet. "But I hope you will not refuse. The Velthari have learned something important from humans. We learned that we are not perfect. We learned that different approaches can be equally valid. We learned that the galaxy is too large and too dangerous for any species to face alone. Jiho thought about the past 3 years, the occupation, the suffering, the slow growth of understanding, the war that had forced cooperation. It would take decades, maybe centuries, for humans to truly forgive what the Velthari had done. But holding grudges while the galaxy burned seemed foolish. I cannot speak for Earth, Jiho said. That is for our leaders to decide. But I will tell them what I have seen. That the Velthari can change, that together we are stronger than apart. Velkas extended his hand, palm forward, a Velthari gesture of respect. Jiho placed his hand against it. 6 months later, Jiho stood in the same compound where this had all begun. But everything was different now. The walls that had divided human and Velthari workspaces were gone. Engineers from both species worked side by side on new ship designs. The guards were gone. Humans came and went freely. Sora had been appointed as the head of a joint medical research facility. Do-hyun was leading an AI development program. Hyejin was teaching Velthari doctors about preventative medicine across 3 worlds. Taeyang had returned to Earth to help build new defense systems. Mina had taken a position as an admiral in the Joint Fleet, commanding both human and Velthari forces. Yunho was training the next generation of tactical officers, passing on the lessons learned from the Krell War. And Jiho had become the official human liaison to the Velthari High Command, working directly with Velkas to ensure the partnership between their species continued to grow. On this particular day, a ceremony was being held. The compound was being converted from a military installation into a joint research facility. Representatives from both Earth and the Velthari homeworld had gathered for the occasion. As the speeches ended and the celebration began, Velkas found Jiho in the crowd. The commander held 2 glasses of wine, 1 human, 1 Velthari. He offered the human vintage to Jiho. "Do you remember when I gave you that strange order?" Velkas asked. "When I told you to fix the conduit using any method you wanted?" "I remember thinking you were insane," Jiho admitted. "I was desperate," Velkas said, "but also curious. I had watched you work for weeks, seen you solve problems in ways our engineers could not understand. I wondered what would happen if I simply let you try." He sipped his wine. "That order changed everything. Not just for you and me, but for our entire species." "It was not the order that changed everything," Jiho said. He looked around at the humans and Velthari laughing together, working together, building something new together. "It was trusting us to be more than what you expected. It was being willing to learn from people you had dismissed as inferior." "Yes," Velkas agreed. "That is the real lesson. Not that humans and Velthari are equal in all things. We are not. We are different. But different can be complementary rather than competitive." He raised his glass. "To partnership. To the future." "To the future," Jiho echoed. Through the windows, Jiho could see new ships being constructed in the orbital yards. They bore symbols from both Earth and the Velthari homeworld. Hybrid vessels, designed by minds from 2 worlds working as one. Those ships would explore new sectors of the galaxy, face new challenges, encounter new species. And when they did, they would do so together. Not as conquerors or conquered, not as masters or servants, but as partners who had learned that the universe was too vast, too dangerous, and too full of wonders for any species to face alone. The strange order had indeed changed everything, and the changes were only beginning.